This is an extract from the Leader podcast, hosted by David Marsland. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Live musicians and a real audience. This was Blossoms playing at Sefton Park in Liverpool last Sunday in front of 5,000 people, not a face mask in sight. The gig was part of the government's events research programme, which is piloting ways of getting venues open and crowds back into them. The next test is the biggest yet, with a global audience watching. The BRITs 2021. 4,000 people will watch Jack Whitehall host the biggest event in the UK's music calendar at the O2 Arena. There'll be acts like The Weeknd, Lipa and Coldplay performing. It's an enormous undertaking that will be monitored by scientists with implications for how the country brings live entertainment back after the pandemic. Joining me now to explain how it's all going to be done is BRIT spokesman Genarro Castaldo. And first of all, Genarro, the awards may have been delayed from February, but you must be delighted to have them at all.
That's right. I mean, the BRITs team organising are absolutely thrilled that it's going ahead and it's going to go ahead with a live audience. In fact, it was always going to go ahead. It was going to take place in some shape or form, even if it was just behind closed doors and filmed, because it's very important to celebrate that night in British music. In fact, music's been so hugely important to the public generally. You know, we've seen lots of research and a rise in music consumption generally ever since lockdown began. So people have turned to music. We know how much it means to them. So having this moment where we can all come together, celebrate, but also reflect on the past year or so, I think was important. But of course, once we knew that we were part of the pilot scheme, then that changed the whole dynamic.
So what does that mean then to be part of this scheme?
Taking part means two key things. One is that it will hopefully be a very important stepping stone in the return of live music at scale. So all those venues that have been on their knees around the country, in London and elsewhere, if it all goes to plan, and if the feedback and research suggests that it's been successful and you can take place and contain the spread of any infection, then it means that government can inform their future policy and start to open things up sooner rather than later. So that's a hugely important, significant. But the other thing is, once we knew it was taking place, we thought, well, how can we make it really special? How can we reflect? And of course, the obvious thing was to say, we want to invite as many essential workers as we can who have really helped to get the country through the pandemic and lockdowns these past, more than a year now. And so we decided that the best way to do that was to carry out a ballot, which took place some days ago. We've got all our guests, so there's at least 2,500 key workers and their guests. And then on top of that, there's another 1,500 or so that are from the industry. Either they're the nominees or their guests, they're the labels, everyone involved behind the scenes. And of course, it's been their generosity because they're funding their participation, as it were. So that's helping to essentially fund the involvement of all our invited guests.
And all those guests amounts to a lot of people who are all going to be all together in one enclosed space during a pandemic. How is that going to be done safely?
Once they're inside, and I should say, firstly, they need to take all the precautions traveling there, of course. They need to carry out a lateral flow test to demonstrate that they're negative, and that will actually allow them to get in on the day itself. They need to have that on their phone. So make sure you charge up your phone, of course. And then separately, they're also being invited to take part in the kind of the experiment of the actual sort of pilot itself. So they're being asked to take a PCR test before and after. So that's the stuff I guess the scientists want to get hold of to understand whether or not infection is spread as a result of that. And then they need to be part of track and trace so they can get in touch and sort of follow up in the usual way. With a bit of luck, everyone coming in will be negative. They'll make sure they've got that all locked down, as it were, and everyone can have the best time. And we can emerge out of this not only with having had a celebration of music, but the knowledge that it's gone really well. There's been no transmission of the infection, and then we can start to open up other events in future. And once they're there, they should have the best time as they normally would. There'll be 4,000 in total. Normally it's 12,000, but we're hoping that those 4,000 will make the same amount of noise as a full capacity audience would.
Oh, I'm sure they will. But then again, the O2 Arena does hold, I think it's 20,000 normally. So they're going to have to really make a lot of noise to make up for that crowd size, aren't they?
And I think they will. Yeah, no, the reason we only have 12,000 normally is because there's a huge amount of staging. Normally, a large part of the sort of the ground floor is taken out by obviously the staging. Typically in the past, you've just seen tables as well, but they won't be there. So really, it's partly because of the limits, but also because all the staging taking place does take up space. But we're confident that 4,000 will make a huge amount of noise. I think there's going to be so much pent-up excitement and people just wanting to have the best time. And of course, they'll have access to refreshments and food and all those things. It's going to be like a normal gig. But I think people want to come not just because it's the Brits, but I think they realize it's almost a historic moment. Yeah, and one day they'll be able to look back and say, I was at that first one after lockdown, and it was part of a scientific experiment almost. So I think there's that aspect to it, which will excite people also.
Yeah, it does feel like this kind of, it's almost like an icon of Britain opening up again, really, isn't it? Here come the Brits. We will keep going. And what I think is going to be really interesting is how the artists who are performing on the night are going to react to, for the first time in a long time, a great big bunch of people out in front of them singing back their songs again, which is kind of why you go into music in the first place, isn't it?
I think they're going to be thrilled. I mean, we had a quote from Lipa, who's going to be, I'm sure, one of the stars of the show, and she's multi-nominated as well, just saying for her, it's an incredible thrill to be there performing at all in front of an audience, but a special honour to be doing it in front of the essential workers, or the NHS staff, social care workers who have got us through. So I think they're going to be very mindful of that. And what's also great, and we've got some other amazing performances. Obviously, Dua Lipa has been confirmed. Arlo Parks, Heady One, Griff, who's the Brits' rising star. She's already been advised of her win, so she can celebrate on the night. And now this is great fun. So Rag and Bone Man has paired up with Pink and the Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Choir. So this theme of the NHS is going to sort of kind of run throughout the Brits. Also, we've got Olivia Rodrigo flying in from the States. She's actually already here, all bubbled up, I think, because obviously they still have to make sure that they take all the precautions. And we've got Coldplay, so that'll be very exciting. And I think it's just been announced that Weekend will also be involved.